I really appreciate you saying you could do this. I'm as you know, like we were basically launching this app, or we're like in the super early stages of it. Me and Jason have been talking about launching something for a while, and we finally kind of had this idea, and we're like, all right, let's like, if we're gonna do something, we should just like start working on it. And so this community app was like the app that we kind of made the push towards. And so you had these tweets, and by the way, my research and my like, I did prepare for this call like all week.
Mhm.
I've been listening to your podcast interviews and stuff, but it does not look that way. It's like a total disorganized mess of like just
All
random
good.
stuff. Um, so yeah, so I did try to go down and do like basically this little process that you kind of outlined for me on over Twitter. Um, and yeah, and I'm recording this. I don't know. Well, I hope to use it like for YouTube or whatever, something at some point. But
Okay.
um,
Sure.
and so yeah, so I went down basically this list of stuff that you kind of outlined for me here, and I did run into questions and stuff. So I was thinking maybe we
Mhm.
could kind of walk through this process a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It would be good if you would be able to give a little bit more context as far as like why'd you pick this thing?
Okay.
Like what signals were you getting that you'd be able to
Yeah.
sell this, that you'd be able to grow into a business? What work did you do beforehand to like say, okay, these might be the types of paying customers that we'll get, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the sort of first things I did was I kind of looked at the market in terms of like community apps in general. And like, there's a lot of momentum there in
Hmm.
particular. Like, I think I mentioned like Circle.so is one of the big competitors that are kind of taking off right now. And then also I've just noticed like for years, like all of these basically solutions to do the sort of thing that I want to do, um, have existed like as like custom built sort of options. So
Okay.
like there was like coding frameworks and stuff to build these like Hacker News or Indie Hacker style apps, right?
Yep.
So that kind of told me like people were like willing to invest development into like that, which is expensive. That was another little bit of a signal to me, like,
Gotcha. So people are building these, spending money at real effort to make
mhm.
these. They want it, and
Yeah,
yeah, they're showing that by basically just building it or like paying other people to build it for them.
yeah, exactly.
Huh.
And
Okay.
I'm in the like Slack community world, I guess, in terms of like internet marketing. A lot of that's more of the free side, I think. People creating these Slack communities, Facebook groups. Like, there's real companies that have these things. Like ConvertKit had these.
Hmm.
Tons of them. You probably have them for BitSketch and stuff.
Yeah. What do you mean that you're in that side of things? You mean like
Well,
as a person, like as someone who's part of like these communities? Is that what you mean, or something
I
else?
mean both. I have my own for my business where
Okay.
it's like for Folio. I have basically invite my customers into a Slack community and
Yeah.
answer questions and stuff. And then I also am a part, yeah, like a member of as a customer or as a community member, I guess, in some communities.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And so, okay, the first step that you kind of outlined was that all pretty clear? Do you think that gave you like a good?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Okay.
there early on, even before like jumping into stuff, I think one of the things is knowing whether you're going kind of horizontal initially or if you're targeting a few different categories of people like to start. I think there could be, you don't have like, you're not going really niche with this product. You don't have like a ton of clarity over like, this is our exact perfect customer. And that's okay. A lot of times, some products are just horizontal, or some products, it takes a little bit of time to, like, you suspect, you kind of know who is the target customer. But you might have like, oh, okay, maybe these three are the ones that we'll probably focus on. Um, so that's part of it. The other part is just like, how much do you need early on, or how much do you want early on? There's no right or wrong answer with that stuff, but meaning like, how much volume do you want early on? Of course, you could say, well, close this. You could say, well, the more volume we get, the better, right? So
Mm.
yeah, if you had like 100,000 people visiting, your site, then you'd be in a pretty good position. But there's work that needs to be put into it, and effort and stuff like that. So it's more like, what's just enough in the early days for you to get like what you need out of the early stage, right? The learning, and like being able to narrow down on like the main use cases and who your target customer is, and what's the next steps after that.
Yeah.
Like, do you have a feel for, because some people like, there are even different ways of doing that. Some people do it to where it's almost like one at a time, like a small batch. Like, okay, I have a list of people I'm going to email. I'm going to work with like 5 people, kind of, you know,
Yeah.
really
We do.
hands-on,
Mhm.
or more like, I'm going to build the list and kind of go wider, and just, let people in, and all that stuff.
Well, so I think we do have a couple people that we talked to. Like I showed that landing page that I showed you to a couple people, like Mike Julian, who he's got he runs Last Week in AWS. Anyways, it's a real business, like $1 million per year or whatever, and he was interested in it like as a down the line sort of thing, like building a sort of community. And so we do have a couple people like that we want to interview, and we want to kind of talk through what they're looking for. The thing that as I kind of went into like looking at 2 or 3 types of people to target, which is what you said, like look for. So when we started, like the app idea, I guess part of it for me was like I felt like I had somewhat of a gut like understanding of the market, because it's something that I wanted for my site. Like I wanted to build basically like a designer news that I controlled or whatever,
Yeah.
that would bring me traffic for Folio, and that could be kind of like like a channel for me, and because I've used designer news and hacker news and indie hackers like so successfully for bringing traffic, that I was like, there was like a need there for me, and it lasted years, where I still wish I had this for a couple years. And so that's part of the reason that I wanted to that I thought that I could make this like successful.
Mhm.
This idea was because I felt like it was like dog fooding or whatever.
Like, scratch your own itch sort of
Exactly.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And now that I've kind of gotten into it a little bit more,
Mhm.
I felt like that sort of approach there was a negative side to it that I didn't realize at first. So like the fact that target market would be like a founder, so to speak, or like really early stage, and I feel like I started feeling like that target market would be a worse customer. So they're used to using Slack for free, and they're used to, um anyways, so, and like they don't have probably the budget to invest in something and like actually build the community, or even
Yeah.
just like the chances of them having a successful community seemed lower than like
Mm.
a company that has a dedicated community manager, right? Like that company is going to actually invest, and I feel like they have a more realistic path to like a successful community. And so that's where I started kind of getting into roadblocks, I guess. Like that's a totally different use case. They want totally different features from it.
Do they?
Well, that's what I started noticing in some of
Okay.
the research I was doing, like the Capterra stuff. Like they started talking about like, oh, we wanted these integrations, we want single sign-on,
Yeah.
like these pretty complex features for that. Like when I don't know if they're even complex features, but like for me and Jason at the moment, where he's not even able to jump on a Zoom call, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah,
lot to ask to build.
you're trying to go really lightweight,
Yeah.
basically. Like,
Yeah.
what's the um, what's the most simple product that we could put out there and start to get customers for?
Yeah. And then there were a couple other like target markets that seemed interesting to me, like podcast communities, conference communities, which were a little bit more niche and a little bit more. I felt like, but still had some of the aspects that I felt like I had that kind of gut feel for of the market, better sense for. So,
Mm.
um, and so, yeah. So, how do you kind of feel about that whole like dog fooding or like scratching your own itch sort of thing? It seems like you take a pretty like opposite approach of that, right?
Yeah, I've nothing I've done has really been like that. It
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to it. I think it can work for people. It works for people all the time, right? I just think that you can get yourself in trouble sometimes for the reasons that you already stated. Plus, uh, if you do zero in and lock in on that sort of customer type, you kind of go down a path that may just be very different than who your ideal customer is, and it may be harder later on to sort of change the product to refocus on a different target customer. It's what early days, especially if you have if it's kind of fuzzy in the way that it is right now for you. I do, and it's sort of the same thing with horizontal products, which is like DocSketch is super horizontal. Like to keep things sort of everything, like from marketing to pricing and all that stuff, relaxed and open, and not worry so much about like nailing, perfect pricing, nailing perfect positioning, or everything. Focus more on the use cases, the jobs that a product is accomplishing, and
Yeah.
once you then have those start to get users that start to use the product, then narrow in on like, okay, who's obviously getting the most value, who, like, how do we reach them, and then like focus the product and pricing and positioning and all that maybe later.
Yeah. So when you say like keeping it broad and stuff, like at the same time, like you're wanting to do like marketing and sales, right? To
Mhm.
like start getting that early feedback that you mentioned, um, and iterating on kind of the product. So like, yeah, maybe we can
So
dive into that.
like, I wouldn't put for your product, I wouldn't put stuff like on the headline like for founders, or you know what I mean. I
Yeah.
wouldn't make it that specific. um you might do marketing for several groups that you think like, okay, like scratch my own itch, like I had a need, there other founders that have the need as well. um let's do some marketing where we're reaching those founders, but that's like your outreach emails, your whatever, right? Like content that you might put on a site to attract that type of like bait that you might use for like opt-ins for ads or whatever. um your product and even your website, except for maybe a landing page or two, are still not going to be like super focused on that one type, right? So
Yeah.
and then you could do that with a couple of other like segments, like, okay, maybe it's a marketing coordinator, or maybe it's you know product manager or something like that you're targeting next. And um, you do it kind of in a similar way.
Yeah. And so like when I'm going in and doing like the initial research, keeping it broad and everything, um, there was a, so yeah, so one of the things you said was to like look at like the competitors, right? And look at their like
Mhm.
top pages and stuff and links. Um, maybe I should open up Ahrefs and we can walk through like what that means.
Yeah, they might not have, not in a lot of markets, there just isn't much to find, especially if it's kind of
Yeah.
early on like this. you might not have things that are super obvious that like, oh, okay, they're getting traffic this way. So like 8,000, 9,000, organic visitors, maybe they have twice as much because Ahrefs underreports a lot of times, usually often by half. So yeah, it's not a lot of traffic. It's not a lot to go on. Maybe they have some really targeted pages. So like if you go to top pages, what are you seeing there? So it's mostly like branded searches, right?
Right.
It's like nothing else, but they're like very little traffic for anything else.
Right. Yeah. There's a component to it where it's like the communities kind of push back traffic to that, to the site. So like people are looking for some random music community and they come back to it.
Yeah, dude. Like part of, so this is just like part of the competitive research that I do, right? So I go in here and then I look at that, and then I look at like organic keywords and see sort the keywords by the cost, and then see like maybe there's a little bit of traffic, but there are some really high value keywords that they're getting stuff from. So on the left hand side, there's a organic keywords nav on the left.
Oh,
yeah. And then just click on CPC, right?
Oh, shoot. I need to upgrade. Yeah.
Yeah. So you would basically get, an export and just see like, oh, what are the most valuable keywords that they have. And, maybe there's nothing really there that's like, no, it's all kind of word of mouth. People know the brand. And maybe not exactly word of mouth, like, there are other ways that they learn about the brand, and but when it comes to Google, that's what they're searching for. Like that's part of it. The other part is like looking at stuff like G2 Crowd, Capterra, talking to customers, listening, like literally doing who are the founders, and then or who's working on marketing, and then doing searches like by their name, space interview, space podcast, right? Like if they're talking about how they're acquiring customers, like anything that basically gives information on like how is it that they're, maybe it's that they have certain, just keep people using especially with stuff like this, you could have like several big names using a product, and then a lot of people who are in that community may are kind of aware of the brand and what they're using for this for to manage the community, and that sort of starts to become a thing that people recommend, like, oh, so and so is using this, or maybe I should use it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, like, okay, so you're talking about like actually trying to find basically the companies that are using some of these apps, and like trying to do background research on them specifically, and they're interviewing when they get interviewed, or when they talk about these things as like marketing.
The companies,
so like,
your competitors, basically.
Okay.
Looking at, like basically just looking at all sorts of, any ads that they're running. You could go to Facebook, right? And Facebook has a way to look up the ads for any Facebook page. G2 Crowd, like go through reviews and stuff like that, and see if there's anything besides like just from a product perspective, if there's anything that you're picking up there, because you see how it says marketing coordinator, like you have positions on there.
Yeah.
Right. That clue you in, like, oh, these tend to be the type of customers. It could be just a whole bunch of different types of positions to where it's not super clear, but maybe you see a little bit like, oh, okay, the marketers kind of tend to use this more, right? So it's just like getting a little bit, it's not going to give you the whole thing. It's just getting a little bit more clarity on how their business works and what type of customers they tend to get. But I would I would like that's something that can help you maybe focus some of the efforts. But I would really start with, even before that, I would start with a strategy called by HubSpot called surround sound, SEO, surround sound marketing. I don't know what they call it exactly.
Okay.
Look into that one if you haven't before. And it's
No, I haven't
basically
heard of that one. Yeah.
okay. So it's basically, especially when you have an established category, like this is a category, right? It
Hmm.
exists. And all it is this is like partly what we do with DocSketch that kind of helps us bring in customers that we might not otherwise be exposed to, and realize like, oh, this is actually a really good type of customer. Maybe we should look at this. Is be everywhere that people that are looking for this solution are, where all the places that they're looking, right?
Okay.
So a way to do that is, where are these places being mentioned? Like, think, meaning like, oh, maybe somebody types in, what is this category called?
Like community apps,
Yeah.
I
So
think, or
maybe
community
somebody,
management platform.
so maybe somebody types in community apps or community platform. What pages come up? And then like try to get in mentioned in those same pages, right? Like
Yeah.
an easy way to go to Capterra, G2 Crowd, all this, like scroll up on this page, and then see online community management software.
Yeah.
So click on that, and then take that URL, and at the top. So basically what we're doing is basically going into the G2 Crowd, into one of these competitors, seeing what category G2 Crowd, G2 now I guess is what they're called, what category G2 puts them in, going
Uh-huh.
into the category and taking that URL for the category and pasting it into Ahrefs, because these online review sites are very focused on like owning that category traffic. So
Okay.
whenever a buyer is like, that's their own, that's entirely how they work. Whenever a buyer is looking for this type of software, they want to be the thing that comes up first. So you can cheat a little and just basically use the work that they've done on here. See, and this is it. All these places, everything, all these keywords that you see coming up, that's the type of traffic that you want. And some of it is like, there are several different types of categories that you'll have to work on to be in those categories. Some of them are going to just be like pay to play, like G2 and Capterra and stuff like that. So you literally put up your page and you pay a little bit to at least get up beyond the free stuff at the beginning, right? Like you don't want to spend maybe a whole bunch at the beginning, but to start to get a little bit of that traffic, as many of those as you can be on. That's also a really good signal for Google, like, hey, this product belongs in this category, right? They're always kind of mentioned there. Another thing would be like, go down the list, for these keywords and see who's ranking on there.
Yeah.
And you might find like blog posts that have like, oh, the best community software or whatever. Get added to those. That's easier said than done, but trust me, it's worth the effort to get added to those.
Okay. Yeah.
And what happens is, what starts to happen, we've done a bunch of this, and what starts to happen is you get people who are basically buyers. So they're super qualified. They're ready to buy. They know what this thing is, which is awesome. The conversion rates on this stuff is way, 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 way better than anything else that you could do. Seriously.
Nice.
It's really good. And then you just get people, it has nothing to do with like their position, their job title, whatever. It's just people that want this stuff. And you get it like a, wide list of all these different groups, and you get some good learning about like who are good target customers.
That's awesome. Um, yeah. So you mean like literally like pay G2 on, like create a listing on G2 of a product and then pay them to get higher on on this page, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then so okay, so
G2 doesn't really have a thing like that. So their algorithm works differently. You can pay them, but it's for like lead capture and stuff like that. But like
hmm,
Capterra does, you can go on there, and then there are some other ones that do to where you can just pay and get, move it up a little.
nice. So the question I have, I guess at this point is also, I think it's more about like the where we started,
Yeah.
because like some of this is a little bit I think more straightforward, but whenever I try to jump into some of this or like start going down this path of like doing some of this marketing that makes sense to me,
Yeah.
I then like go back to like, is it even the right product? Like it's obviously not the right product right now because it's just so early, but like
Yep.
how do I make sure that like, yeah, I'm going down the right path at least with the product.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this
and
is,
wow.
this is why I mentioned, like, you have to decide like how much is enough, right? Like, meaning how much volume is enough for you to learn that. Like, are you
Mm,
building the right features? Are you like, is this something that you want to continue doing? How hard is it really? And some people just work with really small group of people, and because they kind of, the better you understand your customer, the easier that approach is.
yeah.
The less you understand your customer, the more work I put in first to just like cast a wide net and bring in more people. It doesn't have to be a ton, but enough to start to, to get some users in there that you can learn from.
Yeah. So you think like we should basically try to get like our initial idea or like our initial product idea that we have at least to a point where people can use it, right? And then start iterating on like on that once people are using it, as opposed to like trying to do interviews and research and like marketing before it's like they can even sign up for anything. That wouldn't make sense, right? Or like
That if
there's
you so if you know so if you know that if you have concerns about like just the product in general, like, maybe we kind of like, I don't know that we're going to be able to make this learn. Maybe I don't like how this category works. Maybe like the thing that I'm focused on that makes this different, like you said, part of what makes your product different is that the communities are sort of public and it helps with acquisition and stuff like that. And maybe your angle approach is going to be off, and you're not interested in like having to do it the same way that everyone else is doing it, mostly, just a little bit better, meaning like, oh, it's got to be more of a private thing just like everyone else. And I kind of don't want to do that. Like, those are big questions, and it depends on your constraints. Like for doc sketch, I had the same sort of I had some ideas on like target customers, and all that stuff turned out to be wrong, by the way.
hmm.
um, and I did several things to start marketing, but I was very confident that I could make it work. I knew that the category was big, that we could, that and I was pretty flexible as far as like, what type of product do I want to build in a category, and do I want to be in this category? So all those things were, I was pretty sure about, and I was pretty confident, even though like everything else was super fuzzy, or a lot of things were really fuzzy.
Hmm.
So that meant that I'm going to start putting significant effort into doing a surround sound, marketing, not just like being on G2 crowd. It's like even more valuable than that. Because sometimes, it's just not worth it, but you're not worried about like getting ROI. You're worried about like learning right early on. But being on blog posts that have that are ranking for these keywords that are for people that are searching for this type of product and being mentioned on there, those do really well. Those convert really well. Those are 100% worth it. They just take effort and time, and
Yeah.
so, but because I knew that, yes, I was going to compete in this category, and yeah, I'm this product can work. and I'm going to make it work, I put in a significant amount of like work on content marketing, some ad stuff, some interviews, some, you know what I mean? Like all sorts of stuff. And the less clearly you confidence you have on that, the less I'd do that.
Okay. So the less confidence I have in like exactly what target I'm going after, then the less
I wouldn't even say
emphasis.
target because I didn't have like I was probably where you are as far as like clarity on like the target customer when I started. So it wasn't about that. It's about are you confident that you want to be in this category and that you want to build this type of product? It sounds a little bit weird because there's not a lot of like thinking is usually not about products, and going into businesses not framed in that sort of way. But that's
Right.
a real thing. Like if you discover that the product needs to be kind of positioned differently and that you need to go after different type of customer, are you okay with that?
As in like instead of a founder, like maybe more like a community manager sort of thing, or like, do you mean just like a
Yeah.
totally different? Yeah. I think
Community manager, like, okay, so that's a little bit different. But what if you find out that you need to sell enterprise to actually kind of make this work? So, and that's how like these businesses are getting kind of these other businesses, but the real money comes in on the enterprise side.
I guess it depends. I'm not that like knowledgeable, I guess, about that whole side of the equation, if I would like it or not. But I would say it would be, I'd be open to it in some ways. But that would mean like big sales teams or sales sort of conversations and stuff, like jumping on calls with people and like,
and often you don't really start there. But how big is this category? It's like kind of big, but not that big, right?
Right.
It's not that big, so that's another factor. That would be one of the, so meaning like, is there a lot of room for a lot of new products to come in and do really well, or is it really like going to be dominated by a few products at the top?
Yeah. Something that I noticed when I started doing some of this research with you, or that you mentioned, was like this idea of like alternative to Facebook groups was like something that Href said had like okay volume. I mean, it's low probably compared to the stuff that you do, but like very low keyword difficulty.
Yeah.
And then I started looking, like going down that path a little bit and looking at it. And although Ahrefs said like it's not competitive, my Google searches seemed to look like all of these companies were basically targeting this keyword. So that made me think like, oh, maybe it is competitive because they had like ads specifically targeting that, and like like high quality blog posts and
you can't go by numbers with the like, that's a good starting point, but then so like look up one of those terms
just in
in
Google.
Ahrefs. No, on Ahrefs. Yeah. So this is the way that I typically do the research when for really anything when it comes to ranking for it. So you get a keyword difficulty score. This one's Facebook groups alternative, and the keyword difficulty score is 8, which on the surface seems like super easy. Like, okay. And it says you'll need 9 backlinks to rank in the top 10. So what I do is I scroll down, and then to the bottom, you get a listing of like who's ranking top 10. And look at
it's basically all the competitors in this category at the top.
And then they have but also what matters is like how many domains they have linking to these resources, right? So like at the top, they have like 15, 7. So it's not a ton. It's pretty reasonable. You have a couple that are like 5, 1, 6 that are up there. I mean, it's some work. And then the question is like, is it worth it? A lot of times, sometimes it can be, but especially when you're talking about like alternative to free things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like I would be alternative to Facebook groups and alternative to like Google groups. I would say that this is less likely to result in high quality traffic, right? And would be worth like creating the pages maybe, but I don't know. I'd prefer to spend time more on like the other type of keywords
Okay.
that I mentioned, you know.
Yeah.
Like those are
Yeah.
buyers. The other ones
Yeah.
are buyers or people who are looking for that category at least.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing I was noticing about this keyword was like these like tribe.so, their product is literally like a Facebook groups like
Mm,
clone sort of thing, and like circle,
right.
that's the same sort of thing. And so, yeah.
And so then
Uh,
like the alignment, especially with search, matters a ton. If it's off just a little bit, bad
yeah.
news. It
Yeah.
doesn't work that well.
And so like along the same lines, like my thing is more, one of the keyword strategies I was like considering was something maybe like like Hacker News clone, or
Mhm.
like Indie Hackers clone, like that sort of thing, where people are looking to create basically the exact thing that the product would do.
Yeah.
And so the intent seems like lined up in that way,
Yeah.
but I don't know, clone might be like like sort of like they're looking for like a free solution also, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That stuff's kind of like experimental too. You want to go with like bottom of the funnel things that you know convert, or things that you're pretty sure work, right?
Okay.
So there, on the organic side, there's really not a ton here to work with. There's some, and there's some stuff that you could do. Like, but the easier, less time consuming stuff would be like starting with um like those buyer keywords, bottom of the
Yeah.
funnel ones. And then
Okay.
yeah, from an organic standpoint, maybe I'd try to find something like high volume, top of the funnel, to where I'm like, I think I feel pretty good. Like, I keep seeing marketing X, marketing manager, or marketing whatever, assistant coordinator on there. Who else is doing really good work at targeting those types of customers? What are their keywords? Put them in Ahrefs, do a bit of analysis there, and like, oh, what might I be able to target that would have good alignment with the product, that
Yeah.
would get me a lot of traffic, and only
Yeah.
like do like one page, like literally, because there's a limited amount of time, right? So we're just
Yeah.
talking about like getting started. This is early days, and you can't do everything. So I would literally do like maybe one page, top of the funnel, that's kind of really well aligned with your product. One or two pages like more lower down in the funnel. So that's like maybe possibly it, if doing content at all. Like I still don't have a blog for DocSketch,
Yeah.
or even before then, it's just like outreach, like one on more like grinding sort of type of work to get the
Really.
early customers. Yeah.
When you say grinding, like that's reaching out to people that, or
Yeah, and try to like, instead of like, even with the outreach, instead of like a blasting, like trying to get a huge list and trying to get a few, doing it way more at a personal level. There are different approaches to outreach, right?
Mhm.
There's one to where it's just it's going to take you a lot more time, but it's more tends to be more effective.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
authentic.
and it just takes a lot more work. And it could be a good way of like figuring out like if your pitch is actually, like, your angle is actually good for this for that segment.
Hmm. And so when you're saying that, you're talking about like just your, like pretty much your network, that like companies and people that that you're reaching out to, or are you building a list like this sort of way of like, oh, I think online community managers might be the people making these decisions. I should make a list and try to find them and go down that path and like.
Yeah, it's like a combination of things, starting from literally just going on LinkedIn and almost doing like customer development type, calls
Yeah.
to just speak to like 10 of them, right? Starting there, to running LinkedIn ads. Maybe that's a good place to run ads. It's going to be super expensive. ROI is probably not there, but we're just trying to get the right type of person and learn from this person and see if they'd be willing to pay for it. You're at the stage where people can pay for the product.
No, I have like one basically instance of the app currently running, and it's me. It's like I'm doing a beta version of the community for
Mm,
myself. And so right now, like, yeah, onboarding would be manual. So you can't even like sign up for the app right now. And a couple features too that like need to be done before we can do that. But that's where it's at currently.
gotcha. Yeah. So you're even at the earliest stages to where it's really like, how hard is it to get people to like even try this thing without paying at this point?
So I do have like I have that landing page set up,
Yeah.
and I've really just done like mostly on Indie Hackers. I've posted the link a few times in there,
Yeah.
and we've gotten like 50 signups for like the waiting list, which is nothing. But I feel like I'm confident I could get that up if I were confident about this like market of founders.
Mm,
Where I get less confident is probably like once we go down to like marketing managers. If I start targeting that, like who knows? I guess like if I can
gotcha.
even find where they hang out and stuff.
Yeah. So you know what to do, sort of like for the early founder stuff, and then like the rest, it gets a little bit fuzzy. So something that happens when you even, and you might be okay just enough, just by doing like mostly focused on the early founder stuff. The other communities on there, like Product Hunt, Indie Hackers, Hacker News, Maker, whatever you have on there, right? Like
Yeah.
those type of things. What happens is that a lot of times founders are involved in the buying process, even though they may have like a marketer on their team that's actually going to take this over, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes they're the initial entry point, and by targeting them, you sort of still end up with somebody like that, where your actual customer or user is the marketing person on there, if
Okay.
that
Yeah.
makes
That.
sense.
Yeah. That does make sense.
It's a little bit, it's like you can try to be super specific, but you're just gonna like get a bunch of overlap, and you're just gonna get stuff that you didn't expect. And
Yeah.
that's good. That's what you want in the early days. I would still run, like, if you have on there, online community, marketing manager, like those seem pretty good things to go after. I would still go run experiments to get a feel for like uh how hard or easy. And it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm having trouble right now. It doesn't mean that like it's not going to work and you just can't reach them. You just start to get a feel for, how much work are we going to have to put into, like, to start to actually um get distribution with these segments.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's really like early days. You don't need a ton, but um like I know you, I know you tend to think about these things. So I would probably say this differently if I was talking to somebody else, to where I'd say like, you need more than you think you need is what I would be telling them, right?
Okay.
uh for you, I would say don't worry about it so much. Like, just get some people in there using the product and all that stuff, just enough to where you feel like if you I think that this is probably a good way to think about it. If you do feel like you're not learning fast enough, when it comes from the early users, it probably means you need to get more people in there.
Okay.
Is,
Awesome.
is what it comes down to.
That's like the perfect thing I needed, like to hear, like the that sort of gauge to give me as I'm kind of going through this process of like, okay, so if, yeah, you said what you said. So, yeah, man,
Yeah,
I
and
really appreciate it.
no, I was just going to say, yeah, and I wouldn't, like, you have a bunch of different segments on here. I would just do, like, you know what to do with on the founder side. You probably have like to get enough of the people that you need, so you're pretty good there. And then just like, it is legit experimental on the your number 2 segment there. I wouldn't go like, oh, get a whole bunch of them, go down the list and experiment and iterate. Okay, now the next one and the next one. That's like later stage. You're like earlier scrappier, like, for these, you go deeper if you can. So you have more of these, if you can, if you're not like, meaning like the ones that you know less and you have less certainty, the more you can get into sort of like a one-on-one conversation and bringing them on board with those, the better, because you learn a whole bunch more, and you don't learn that much if you have a list and you're like, have a landing page and you kind of have this automatic process ads or whatever that's kind of getting you some signups. It's a that's pretty good when you know more about that segment.
Okay. Just overall, like in terms of the, I guess the product concept that we've put, that you, as far as you know of it so far, like, I guess this is impossible for you to say, right? Like, I was going to ask, like, does it seem like something that like a business that is investing in, like, I guess these channels, right? Like the Facebook channels, the Slack channels, growing these communities, but they're the people who are doing that in the specific way that we want, which is like growing an audience and building and having a channel, just like, I don't know, does that seem like a problem that we should like even be like trying to help solve here? Because companies like, even companies like maybe your size, Ruben, like, does it seem like it's along the right path in terms of a product that could make sense for that, I guess?
You don't want to convince them. You don't want to be having to talk them into it. You don't want to have to educate them to, like, like, oh, they're not doing this, but they're kind of doing similar things. And this is just like a thing that, you know what I mean? It's really like,
you have to get,
it's super easy to talk yourself into like, no, we're not really, this is existing behavior. They're doing marketing, right?
Yeah.
Right. But this is different. Like, running a community and doing marketing in that way, that's a different animal. So like, who's doing that already? Right. And so that's it's more about like going after the people who are already doing that. If there's a significant segment that you can find that's doing that.
Yeah. And if that market is like big enough for the solution, right? Like,
right. Because do they care? Right. Like, there are like 3 different angles that I abandoned with Doc Sketch that seemed pretty good early on, and then like once I got into it, I'm like, nope, this is not a thing. And like I said, it depends on how tied you are to that angle. If you're like okay with you kind of like it, you're gonna maybe even launch with it and see what sort of traction you start to get with it, and it like, you know what, it's not really a thing to where it's getting people excited about, and it's making people decide to buy us versus like anything else. Let's try something different. Then that's cool. That's a different situation versus like, no, this is like this is what it needs to be, right? Like, or else I'm not interested in doing this product.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I am open to like that change, or like that going to what the market would say in that way. Um, definitely. And yeah, how is that like? It's so fuzzy for me though right now, right? Like that.
Mhm.
Obviously, I don't know that because I haven't done like all the work that I guess it would take to figure that out with like talking to people and stuff. What does that like kind of feel like? What's the difference between like where you ended up with Doc Sketch and like how you felt earlier?
I think a lot of the angles that I had in mind earlier had to do with the segments that I thought would be we would would are the perfect ones, the perfect customer, the ideal customer, the ones that we're going to get the most of. And it turned out that those segments use the product kind of, but they don't use it that much, and they're not the highest value customers. So angles aimed the angles made sense kind of for those segments, those one or two segments. But then
Mm,
when we're like, oh, these small business offices like bookkeeping and a bookkeeping office, legal attorney, stuff like that. Those are actually really good customers. They don't give a damn about like how expensive it is. In some cases, they'll just pay. Um, they use the product a lot. They have people dedicated in some cases that just use the product. This angle of uh, like this early angle of like, oh, get more transparency into like this the document signing completion and signing process, meaning like this angle of one of them was uh, we give analytics for people that are signing, and that kind of works okay for like it's borrowed from the proposal category to where it's like you want to know which sections of your proposal people are looking at, right? So
right.
if these are sales documents, then it's kind of like, yeah, that's kind of useful. Like people just like they were on this one page, they were definitely looking a ton at our pricing. They didn't even look at most of our other pages, and then they looked at like the team, they're like, and the work that we've done. So they're really like trying to figure out if we're qualified maybe or whatever, right? um but if you're talking about like, oh, they're just doing on client onboarding paperwork, like this is past that. They don't they don't care about that. Like the angle doesn't matter for them, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of the early angles were off because of that. And then once the it became clear like, it's a different type of customer, it's like, you know what, they don't give a damn about any of that stuff. So de-emphasized or dropped it, removed it from the product.
Was the product like completely different and you guys went in and made the changes to fit that market better, or was it just the marketing on the around it, like and what you talked about different?
It was the more the marketing around it, and there were a couple of features that were specifically built, but they were like super light. They were super light, like they were designed to like, okay, this is how it's going to work, but then only like the start of it. So we had barely enough there to where very super simple couple of versions of it. And we just one of them we just removed, and another one really de-emphasized from the product and are going to eventually just remove.
Oh, wow,
But
man. I
um
know we're getting close to an hour here.
yep.
Um, and you've been super generous, man. Every time I talk to you, I'm like, wow, Ruben's such a great guy, man. He's so generous with your time and like all the help you've given me over the years. So I really appreciate it, man. I
Yep,
really
happy
do.
to help.